Your energy just wants to make me dance. How is this possible? Where do you get this from?
From the source. My chi is aligned. My energy is connected.
She is an award winning host and presenter. She is an international speaker.
What would your 2 cents be for those people that doesn't have the same powers? How can they handle the situation?
For me, the answer is always self-love. You can't pour from an empty cup. If your cup is empty, there is nothing for you to pour out and give to other people.
Welcome, Nicole.
I haven't seen Nikki become that emotional, but there's this one lady where Nikki cried.
So I had to quit. And when I quit, I didn't just quit the job, I quit the entire sector. I burned bridges, Danny.
She is an award winning host.
Vanakkam, welcome, and more to Purely Personal Podcast. This podcast is not about getting that job. This podcast is not about getting that promotion. This is not about starting your own business. This is about your personal brand. When you have your own brand, you can do all of these. My name is Daniel Paul. I'm a personal branding coach, fractional CMO, and a content creator. Today, we have the most energetic human, a true powerhouse. I'm so proud to call her my friend, Nicole Banister, or Nikki Bands. Welcome to Purely Personal, Nikki Bands.
Hey, John, John, John. Just gonna give myself my own sound effects. Thanks for having me, Danny. I'm so happy to be here.
Your energy just wants to make me dance. How is this possible? Where do you get this from?
Honestly, I think it's got to be directly from the source, from the source. My chi is aligned. My energy is connected.
Because I just have to say, even when we met for the first time in Dubai, or the classes that we have done online together with you, you have this amazing energy that just transcends to the other side. If people are just, watching you, if people are talking to you, it's just, goes from one side to the other. And I just wanted to know, is it just because of where you come from? Is it because of the culture? Is it just because of how you have shaped up to be who you are now?
Honestly, I really just feel like it's in my soul, it's in my bones. Like for me, every day is a blessing, every day is joy, every day is passion. And like honestly, there's already so much negativity in the world. I want to bring the joy. Okay, let me bring the light. Let me bring some positivity at least. I feel like there's no reason for us to be perpetuating more sadness and more negativity in the world. So if I can just bring a little bit of joy and a little bit of happiness, then that's exactly what I will do.
Thank you for doing that, Nicole, because that is very important these days, as you said, where negativity is everywhere. And you're trying to
Mm.
set an example to push that forward. So thank you for doing that. I have a question. I know Nicole. I know Nikki Bands. Who is Nicole? Who is Nikki Bands?
That's so funny. Okay, I oftentimes say that my friends call me Nicole Banister and my fans call me Nikki Bands. And basically, the distinction is like whenever I do anything for the government, because I have a long history of working with the United States government and working with the United Nations. When I work with those sorts of clients, then I am happily Nicole Banister. But when I'm out on the streets hosting club nights, that kind of thing, then you can call me Nikki Bands. So that's pretty
So
much the difference.
I love it. I love you just also said that, you worked with the government. We'll get to that a little later, but I want to know the fun side of Nikki Bands. You hosted a show which ran for almost 2.5 years, correct me if I'm wrong. And there, every intro had Nikki Bands. So this
Yes.
personality of Nikki Bands is all over the world, like some of the biggest celebrities and most famous people you've hosted. My question now is, out of all the celebrities that you've hosted in your show, can you name three of the most memorable celebrities slash incidents that moved you?
That's such a great question. My Instagram show, Nikki Band's Live, was one of the greatest joys of my life. Like, I haven't really officially ended it, but I want to bring it back somehow because, yes, it ran for 2.5 years. Every single Tuesday, I was interviewing different actors, rappers, dancers, entertainers, folks from across the globe, sharing their personal stories and digging deeper than their blue tick on Instagram. You know what I mean? And to pick just three out of the 100 interviews that I did is so hard. But honestly, there was a DJ in South Africa named Keezy who I interviewed who was just so incredibly inspiring, like an insane story where he had no money. He was like begging like public taxi drivers to like give him rides for free to a radio station where every single day he went and begged them for a job for like 2 years. And now he's one of the biggest DJs across South Africa. So to hear that story and to hear him literally saying he had no money and like couldn't even get a ride to the studio, like was just so moving. So KZ's story from South Africa was really powerful. I had another super playful interview with a guy named Chimano, who is a Grammy award-winning singer from the East African band Sati Soul. They're one of the absolute biggest bands on the African continent, and they're from Kenya. And Chimano had such a playful and fun take on life, particularly after he had been in this band that was like so well known, and then he came out as queer, and to just hear his story in a place that was like particularly intolerant to the queer community was just so powerful. And for someone of his stature, like someone who's literally performed with like Burna Boy and India Ari and all these people, it was just insane. So that was also amazing. Okay, so there's two. I'm like, what's the third one? It's so hard to pick.
I have a person in my mind. I haven't
Okay.
seen Nikki become that emotional. I have seen Nikki interview some very famous people. But there's this
Mm,
one lady who was there where Nikki cried.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
Nicole Banister was emotional. Nikki Bands was emotional. Can you recall this
Mm.
person? I know very well. Do you know who that person is?
I'm guessing you're talking about my interview with Priscilla Konko Hoveda. Is that the one you're
Yes.
thinking of?
Yes. Why was it
Yes,
so
yes.
emotional? What made you move?
Yeah, that's such a good question. You know, Priscilla is similar to me in terms of ethnicity and cultural background. So she is also half Black, half Iranian, and a different Black and Iranian. She was like born and raised in Iran, and I think her father is from Congo. So I'm half Black American, half Iranian. She has a different kind of sort of Black heritage. But her story was so powerful to me because one, a Black and Iranian mix is already quite rare. Like I can count around the world the number of us. It's already like quite a rare thing. But then to hear how she has constantly just overcome so many hurdles, so many challenges, the way that she was so honest and raw about her Blackness, about her Persian heritage. Honestly, it was just one of those things where I couldn't even keep it together, you know, like to be so resilient in the face of such odds. It just completely made me break down. I couldn't even control myself. I'm like, here I am on IG Live with 100 people watching and I'm just sobbing. And honestly, sometimes the world needs to see that. Sometimes the world needs to see Nikki Band shed some tears.
And I love that. And that is one of the reasons why I remember is because we see someone as a personality that's very strong, that's very powerful. But then there comes a vulnerable side from them that's just like, oh, Nicole Bannister is also emotional. I can connect with her even
Mm,
more now. So thank you for being
mm,
vulnerable. And now let's get into the
mm,
powerful side of Nicole Bannister. Nicole, you're fearless. You're straightforward. You're speaking your heart and mind out all the time. But I'm assuming it didn't start this way.
mm,
What
mm.
shaped you to become really fearless, straightforward, speaking your mind out kind of person?
That's something that's quite an interesting story. And it's funny because I would say it actually did start out that way. And then I lost it. And then I had to bring it back. So that's what I would say. You know, from growing up, I grew up in this very multicultural, multinational household, having a Black American father, an Iranian mother who had very different opinions on the world, right? And like they could prove that even though they were different, even though they came from different places, had different religions and different backgrounds, that at the end of the day, love was the answer. And at the end of the day, it's okay to have differences of opinions. We can still find common ground and build this really inclusive lifestyle and home that they did for me. And so I grew up very fearless with them because they had to go through so many odds. Being a mixed race couple in the United States, my mom not looking like me and being asked, like, is that really your child by people on the streets, right? Like, so I grew up being like, this is who I am. I'm very confident. I'm very bold. And I knew who I was for such a long time. And even through university, going to Georgetown, one of the best universities in the United States and in the world, I had that fearlessness. And then I ended up in a job and in a sector where in the beginning I was so excited and so happy, and it seemed so glitzy and glamorous on the outside, being flown all over the African continent, being based in South Africa, doing incredible sort of high level work for global partnerships, for public health. And for that, you know, it seemed like it was one of those things where I could continue to be so bold and confident and fearless. But slowly but surely, I was being gaslit by this organization. I wasn't being moved forward because of my skin color. I was being challenged anytime I, you know, brought creative ideas. And because of that, I shrunk. I shrunk a lot, and I became a version of myself that I could no longer recognize. And so it really took me quitting that job and that sector, the entire international development sector, to then say, okay, who is the fearless, confident, bold version of Nicole that I need to get back to? And it's taken me the last, you know, 3.5, almost 4 years to get back to her. And so I would say, like, it started off that way, and then I lost it, and now she's back. So it's been quite the roller coaster, Danny.
It's it's actually, I don't know whether to cry or to be angry or to be happy, because if a person as confident as you, if the surrounding changes you to be someone that you're not, right? Because you're super powerful, you're able to get out of that place and rebuild your own self-esteem and bring that power back. Imagine someone who's not innately not that powerful, right? So
Exactly.
my question
Exactly.
is, because you are now in a position to influence people, let's assume the person who's getting the similar job than you, or they are colored like us, and they're not as bold as you or as strong as, you know, other people. What would your 2 cents be for those people that doesn't have the same power, same fearlessness? How can they handle the situation?
For me, the answer is always self love. And I think it's much easier said than done, because it's really, really hard to love yourself when you think that your surrounding community or your job or society around you doesn't love you. It is incredibly hard to say, I choose me every single time. And when you're in a position of feeling like low self esteem or low confidence, you can think it's selfish to love yourself, right? You're like, well, I'm trying to do good in the world, or I'm trying to provide for my family. Like, I can't love me. I need to love everyone else around me. But what I always try and say to folks is that you can't pour from an empty cup. If your cup is empty, there is nothing for you to pour out and give to other people around you. I literally tell my partner this all the time. He just wants to give, 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 give. I'm like, honey, give. Like, yes, I support you. Give away. But also, like, your cup must be full first. So how can you love yourself? How can you be the best version of you for you? Because once that happens, then you can give of yourself to everybody else. So just remember to fill your own cup first. It is critical, it is essential, it is integral to your confidence and to your well-being and to your livelihood. And then you can pour out to everyone else around you. It's not selfish. It's actually the most selfless thing you can do, to love yourself and then to give to everybody else, because your cup is overflowing.
I love how the consistent theme of this podcast so far has been love, and it's either self love or giving love, and love is the answer. And thank you for insisting it again and telling how important it is love, how important love is, if it's for yourself or if it's for others. There's one saying that I heard you say, I'm not sure if it's in one of your podcasts. It gave me goosebumps. Like, let me be myself. If you let me be myself, I'll be the best version of me. I can go from the club directly to the office and perform my KPIs and do my thing. I don't know where you said this. I remember saying it somewhere. And now you're going back to this job, the government job that shaped you and changed you, right? You said self love is the answer. I have a question. How can someone being in a job, now you had the power to quit and go start something, how can they start something like how you did?
Look, like I said, loving yourself is not always easy. And there's so many different ways that someone can choose to love themselves and choose to move forward. You know, you mentioned me like going, you know, straight from the club, straight into the office. Danny, I can give you an example of a time when I was literally on a panel for the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism. Okay, not small people, big people. And I was literally talking to them about, the role that young people play in combating violent extremism, how we can ensure that youth are not being attracted to gangs or to terrorist organizations, having this incredible high level thoughtful conversation. Did that for 2 hours. Immediately following that panel, changed my clothes, put on a little booty shorts, a little skimpy top, and went straight to the club and was like popping bottles with rappers all night long. And literally, I'm like, that describes me in a nutshell. That is the literal transition from Nicole Banister to Nikki Vans. And I remember when I was working in these jobs, I could never find anyone who also lived like that. I've literally never had a mentor in the entirety of my professional career because I could never find someone who had that kind of balance, someone who was able to go from these radically different environments with radically different people and transition seamlessly, right? Some people would call it code switching. I can code switch like a pro, right? And so for me, it was really hard to be my authentic self. And so to get out of that environment, to have that self-love, to go back to your question, I had to quit cold turkey. I had to quit my job and quit the entire sector and say, actually, I'm not doing any US government work anymore. I'm not doing any consulting for the UN anymore. I'm not being in the international development sector at all anymore. I need to stop and think about what I really care about. And that's how I, eventually came to the conclusion that I wanted to be an MC and a presenter and a TV show host, which I now am, which is so different from what I was doing before. But I had to quit like full stop. And some people might need to do that too. Some people might be able to transition from within their existing environment. But for me, I needed a hard quit.
And one quick part of this quitting comes from self love. But also, the other part, which I want to understand, is because you have a multicultural background. You lived in different countries. 70% of the clients that I've worked with, they say that they started focusing on their personal branding or their identity when there was a transition from one country to another, or when they changed their environment, or when they moved for job abroad or elsewhere. So would Nicole Bannister been the same, done the same if she was in United States of America, living in there and not moving to, let's say, South Africa, or not traveling the world? Or has travel changed and shaped the way how you look at your personal branding and who you want to be?
Oh, 100%. Travel is the answer. Travel is the key. You and I literally worked on a course together where my whole course was called Travel the World Like a Pro, which was all about building cross-cultural capital. And, I can literally pinpoint when my family and I moved from the United States to Singapore. I was in high school. So I spent my first 2 years of high school living in Singapore, went to the Singapore American School. And it was at that time, I was 13, 14, 15 years old. My entire perspective on life changed. The little bubble of the USA that I was in was shattered. And I was like, oh, there's people out here who think radically differently about the United States than I did. There's people here who have entirely different languages and cultures and backgrounds. And obviously, living in a super multicultural place like the US, you know that. But it's different when you walk into a grocery store and you don't understand any of the labels on any of the food. It's different when you get into a taxi and you don't understand the music that's in the car, right? When you're immersed in an environment that's radically different from the one that you're used to, you learn, you grow, you are forced to see the world in a different way. And we all need that push. Traveling across the globe has been one of the absolute greatest blessings of my life. It is the reason why I live full time outside of the United States today, why my partner is from Nigeria and not from the United States. Like, travel is the absolute best way that we can understand people who are different from us. And in the world that we live in today, it is absolutely essential that we have that kind of cross cultural capital and we build that kind of global inclusivity and tolerance.
Because we did the course together, and because I already know the story, I want to ask you one thing. My father, my mother, people living in countries that are not more forward thinking, people that are don't have the knowledge about, black culture or racism or colors, they don't have this knowledge, right? It's okay for certain people to call certain color looking people in a certain way, and touch the hair, do this, do that. And I kind of know the story, but you have experienced this yourself. And what is that thing that you want to tell the rest of the world with regards to travel, with regards to culture, which is okay and which is not okay?
such a powerful question. And I'll share the story. I'll share the example, which is that when I first moved to Singapore, I had a wild encounter with a taxi driver where I was getting into a public taxi and, he started driving and it was just me and him. And imagine I'm like 13, 14 years old, right? Like in ninth grade, a freshman in high school. And the taxi driver hears my accent. And he's like, "Oh, you're American." I was like, "Yeah." And then he like looks at me, sees my hair. He's like, "Oh, you're Black American." I'm like, "Yeah, Black American." And he's like, "Oh, so you're a blank." And then he proceeds to call me the N-word. And it was wild because in that moment, I'm like, what in the world has this man just said to me? Like, surely he knows that this is a completely harmful, derogatory slur word that no one should ever use. And then, I had to check myself and be like, okay, but actually, like, does he know? Here's this Singaporean man who's lived in Singapore his entire life. What is his understanding of Black American culture and context? If all he's seeing are, music videos on MTV where all these rappers are calling each other the N-word, then perhaps in his mind it makes sense that he could call that to me. And so I had to take a moment to just sort of check myself and be thoughtful and say, okay, I don't actually think this man is saying this to me to offend me or to be derogatory. I actually think that he just doesn't know what he's saying. And when I say cross-cultural capital, that's exactly what I mean. I mean, can you understand when people are ignorant in the purest sense of the word? Like they actually don't know what something means versus they're trying to be harmful and trying to be derogatory. It's a very fine line, but when you can tell the difference, for me, you have cross-cultural capital. And so I proceeded to just tell this man, I said, "Oh, interesting that you called me that. We actually don't use that word in the United States. It's a very bad word. I know you've probably seen it on TV, but I prefer if you didn't call me that." And he was like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know." Right. And so had I reacted in a very sort of abrasive kind of way, it's very possible that he wouldn't have wanted to have interactions with people of color moving forward or Black Americans moving forward. And, let me just be explicitly clear. It's not our job as people of color to teach other people how to be respectful and decent around us. That's not our job. But I chose in that moment to take a route where I could actually try and teach him something that he maybe didn't know. And turns out he didn't know. So I was able to educate him in some kind of way. So I'm very, very proud of 13-year-old Nicole. She was fierce.
And thank you for sharing this. This is so powerful. And this is a lesson I think every single one of us who's watching, who's listening, has to take is there are some people who might not know what they're doing or saying is wrong. And of course, as you said, it's not your role or my role or people of color's role to educate them. But maybe if a little bit of, 13-year-old Nicole did it by accident, now that man somewhere is educated. But I also personally think this story is super powerful. And I want to take this. And I still take this. Like it's been years since I heard the story for the first time. And it's still close to my heart. And people who are listening, it becomes close to their heart as well. Now, I want to talk about Nicole's transition from working in the United Nations to being a host in a really popular TV show. Can you tell me your journey? How did this happen? What is the story? What made you reach this level of, stardom to be hosting a TV show?
Yes, absolutely. It's such a fun story, and I'm so happy to tell it, Danny. So, I spent the first decade of my professional career working in international development. So, at Georgetown, I studied culture and politics in the School of Foreign Service. So, like half my friends today are diplomats and foreign service officers. And that was kind of the route that a lot of people thought I was going to go as well. Even I maybe thought I was going to go that route. And so, I started working for the US government as a Peace Corps volunteer, which is how I was first transferred to live in South Africa. And then I started working for a big INGO, an international non-governmental organization that did global partnerships work around public health. So I was working on creating healthy relationships, sexual and reproductive health work, and scaling that from our company's headquarters in South Africa to across the African continent. So every week, every month, I was in a different country. I was in Nigeria, I was in Mozambique, I was in Cameroon, I was in Ghana, Equatorial Guinea, Malawi, Zambia. Like I have traveled to 21 countries on the African continent alone, which is truly unparalleled. Like most people cannot say that. And it's truly my pleasure to have been able to do that work for so long. And it was during that time that I became a United Nations Alliance of Civilizations Fellow, was invited to speak at the United Nations headquarters in New York City, and was also doing other talks for, the UN Office of Counterterrorism and places like that. And, it was all very fabulous and fancy on the outside. I was traveling the world. I was speaking at the UN. I was being asked to speak at the State Department. I was doing all this work that on the surface seemed really, really incredible. But underneath the surface, the international development sector is really rooted in institutionalized racism. It's really rooted in white American and white European donors who are using their power and their influence to make decisions on behalf of brown and black people across the world. And I, as a person of color who is from the global north, but living and working full time in the global south, I couldn't reconcile that. I couldn't sit here and sort of be a part of the problem as someone representing the global north, being, from the United States, but then looking closely at all my friends and peers and colleagues in the global south, in South Africa and in Zimbabwe and in Zambia, and really continue to perpetuate these harmful norms and this harmful power hierarchy. So, I said to myself, okay, I need to leave. This isn't good for me. It's not toxic for me. I've tried to bring this up to leadership that we need to switch things up. And, how can we create more equitable platforms for our partners? And it just wasn't happening. So I knew I had to make the decision for me to quit. So I had to quit. And when I quit, I didn't just quit the job. I quit the entire sector. I burned bridges, Danny. I was like, I'm burning bridges. I'm not going to just pretend like everything's okay. It's not okay. I actually had a viral LinkedIn post with 70,000 people who saw the post, 1,000 comments and reactions, where I talked about how there was so much institutionalized racism in the sector and how I had to leave. And so after doing that, I was like, cool. I burned all my bridges. What do I do now? And I realized the thing that I loved the most, Danny, was I loved being on my feet. I loved speaking in front of audiences. I loved making the Minister of Health of Mozambique do fun and playful energizers, like dancing around in her seat. I loved making the US Consul General at the embassy in Cameroon, do playful icebreakers. I loved facilitating, speaking, presenting. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a TV show host. I can still have mass global social impact, which is what I've always wanted to do. My bottom line is always social justice. No matter what, no matter where, no matter who, it's always social justice. That's me personally. The bottom line is social justice. So as a TV show host, I can have massive global social impact, and I can reach more people than the dev sector is reaching. I can reach millions of people with one TV show. And so, Danny, I just decided. I went onto LinkedIn one day. I changed my headline to say TV show host. I had no TV show to my name at the time. And I was like, okay, between LinkedIn and manifesting to the universe, do your thing. And now I have a TV show that's in its 3rd season, streaming on Peacock and doing amazing things.
No way. Your manifestation is now a reality. But I have a small thing that you did really smart in between that gap. You're so smart, and I know it. Your smart strategy is the Nikki Bands show. Your exposure, was it the Miss World? You Bazoma, the Netflix, is it the chief marketing officer? You interviewed some of the most influential, powerful people in the world. I think you are really smart in using your personal branding strategy through Nikki Band's Live, and your manifestation plus the strategy, I personally think, has opened so many doors for you. Is that the case?
That is 100% the case. I talked to a bunch of friends who were actors, who were rappers, who already had some kind of social standing in the entertainment industry. And all of them said, cool, Nicole, you want to be a presenter, you want to be an MC, you've got the look, you've got the vibes, you've got the energy, but nobody knows who you are. So they were like, you need to do something so that people get to know who you are. And this is exactly what you said, Danny. It's all about personal branding and marketing. And so for me, I started Nikki Bands Live, my Tuesday interview series, where every Tuesday I was going live on Instagram with different people from a different country every single week. And I did that all by myself, completely for free, no sponsors, nobody paid me. I couldn't even pay my guests. I was interviewing people who had millions of followers on social media. One of the biggest biggest top 20 female YouTubers in the world, Michelle Kari, and I couldn't pay anyone to come on my show. And I would just say, you know what? I want to do this thing. I want to interview you. Let's share your story. Come on to my show. This is who I've had on before. Shout out to all the amazing people who said yes to coming on my show, because without them, it wouldn't have been possible. And that allowed me to have that brand, have that platform where TV shows would then come to me and say, can you audition for our show? We really like what you're doing. Or clients would say, can you come host our conference? We see you're an amazing interviewer. Can you come moderate our panel? The United Nations calls me again and says, hey, we're having COP28 in Dubai. Can you host a panel on the main stage? I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, we can do that now. Right. So absolutely, that was my strategy, to be able to say, okay, I need to establish myself. People don't know who I am. How do I start to build this global presence, build this global brand? Let me start something that I'm just doing for me. It's not making me any money, but it is increasing my exposure and awareness to the 10th degree.
A lot of times people don't know the power of putting themselves out. And you are a living example of how, when you didn't have the money, you took that chance to reach out to that people. You took that chance to do the Nikki Band's life. You took that chance to wanting to push your personal brand. For someone somewhere watching or listening to this podcast, what is your 2 cents? Why should they show themselves up to grow their personal brand?
What I would say to people who are trying to grow and build their own personal brand is take a chance on yourself. That creative idea that you've always had, that one in the back of your head that you're like, what if I just tried this? What if I just did that? Just do it. Just do it, because nobody else is going to give you a chance. There's no perfect time. There's never a right time. You have to give yourself the chance. Believe in yourself. Believe that you can make something happen. Believe that people will say yes to your podcast or your interview series or whatever you want to do, even if you can't pay them. You have absolutely no idea how people want to connect and how people want to support you. Tap into your tribe. We all have a community. We all have a network. We all have a tribe. Ask your people. They will help you. They will support you to invest in you. And then you can go off and be the best and highest version of yourself.
Well, thank you for supporting me. And this really means a lot that, Nicole, you're supporting me. We're coming to the end of our podcast. This is one question we ask all our guests. If someone watching this wants to get that job, or wants to get that promotion, or wants to start their own business, do you think it is important for them to work on their personal brand?
You must work on your personal brand. It's not even a question, Danny. You have to work on your personal brand, because in this day and age, your NIL, your name, your image, your likeness is gold. It is your capital. It is literally the thing that you have that distinguishes you and sets you apart from everyone else. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or a entry-level employee. It does not matter. Each of you has a point of view in this world. Each of you has something unique to offer out there. And whether it's in the form of a podcast, or it's a series, or it's a book that you want to write and publish, or maybe you want to publish a series of journals that you expertly handcrafted. I don't know. Whatever it is, you have a unique point of view that nobody else has. Do not sleep on it. Do not take it for granted. Your personal brand is your everything.
Nicole, thank you so much for talking about being vulnerable. Thank you so much for showing that self-love is very important for growth. Thank you for telling the story about cross-cultural capital. Thank you for letting people know why it is important to be the authentic self. And most importantly, to grow their brand, they have to show themselves out. To grow their brand, they have to put themselves out. Thank you for being a role model for so many amazing women across the globe, not just women, so many people across the globe. And thank you for inspiring us on a daily basis. It was a pleasure to have you in Purely Personal Podcast.
You are so welcome, Danny. Thank you so much for having me. Keep shining. And I hope that everybody who's watching this continues to support you and follow you along your journey, because you are inspiring all of us, Danny. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And to all our guests and listeners in the future, and I want to say one thing. Go down to the description. You can follow Nicole Banister from LinkedIn and all of our socials. And also we will plug in the show where you can watch Nicole Banister hosting amazing entrepreneurs. And on top of that, if you liked our podcast, please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Spotify. Until next time, this is Danny signing off.